Good day, everybody. Um, Thanks for joining me. Just thought I'd do a short video to pay tribute to Meatloaf, Marvin Lee Addy, who has sadly passed the age of 74. It seems like, and it's a fact of life, it's always been a fact of life, when you get to a certain age, like a certain era of music, that we end up making more of these kind of videos than we do of videos celebrating the continuance of people who are still making stuff. And certainly been a few sad passings in the last few years in the classic rock world. Yeah, it's a fact of life, but I like to make these little videos because I feel it's necessary to pay tribute to and thank those artists for the pleasure that they've given us over the years. Certainly, in no way do I intend these to be documentaries or detailed documentaries about the life of those artists. And there certainly are more, each artist has more fans, devoted fans than I would. They would be best suited to make those kind of tributes, and indeed those kind of detailed documentaries. I'm more like to just express my thanks and at things they've given us to celebrate their life. So, and certainly we've had a few recently: Mike Nesmith, Ronnie Spector. If I was to go further back, I still plan a tribute to Charlie Watts. It's one I've started and stopped a few times, given the sheer scale of his lifetime's work with the Stones, and perhaps one day I'll think of the right way to approach that so that it's the proper tribute for him. But to return to Meatloaf, who was born in Dallas, Texas, and grew up in Texas until he moved to LA for work when he was a teenager. And being a big Dallas has been a big part of my life when I lived there, and I always like to see artists that come from there, and I think it's not necessarily a well-known fact that he was a Texan, but even my good lady wife believed he was from New York. So I think it's fair to say that he had an exceptionally varied set of talents and varied career. Not only was a rock singer and singer in various bands and solo work, he was an accomplished actor, an accomplished stage actor, particularly in musicals, great storyteller, writer, and it's really brought an awful lot to the table for what was normally a rock singer. And indeed, a lot of the material that he performed, and obviously best known as Bat Out of Hell and the Bat Out of Hell sequels, but by no means was that all. I mean, he had a very successful career, sold over 100 million albums. That was certainly by no means the be-all and end-all of his career. But what he brought to that material for me was that acting skill, in that he could perform these songs. I mean, if you look at the Steinman songs, the Jim Steinman songs are written from, they needed a performance. These were stories. These were little Wagnerian novellas that he was performing. So it wasn't just a case of a couple of guys pick up a guitar and then I'll just belt this out. They really needed that performance. They needed that full-throated Wagnerian voice, which is ironic given that he could do that, but he could also do the extremely intimate and personal stuff that were on these albums. So with that, a lot of people would say, well, that's musical theatre and it's not really got a place in rock and roll. I disagree in that. That level of acting performance that he brought to me made a huge difference to that. It turned what was a good rock album in Bat Out of Hell into this magnificent story, almost of epic proportions. And I don't think many artists could do that. So And yeah, his career was, he did things like Hair on Broadway. He did Rocky Horror Show, and then went on to have the part as Eddie, which he'd done on stage in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which is I think the first time I had ever seen him. And Eddie's a great little part. It's yeah. So there's an earlier picture of him from around about the Hair era, and he had been in bands and released albums as well simultaneously with doing this musical theatre work. But this is, I think, from around about the Hair era, and he appeared in that in a couple of different cities, but ended up on Broadway with it. Not necessarily the greatest experience for him, and I believe that he had a few problems with it, and I also felt that it somewhat impacted his being taken seriously in the rock world after. But certainly is incredible grounding and training, and it's not the first rock artist to have done musical theatre. Big guy I like in Scotland, Alex Harvey, he did a lot of that stuff as well as being a rock and roll singer. Steve Marriott, the Small Faces, and so on. It's and Phil Collins. These have all done that kind of thing. So then, of course, his appearance as Eddie in Rocky Horror Show and Rocky Horror Picture Show. Not a big part of the movie, but extremely memorable. And you always know when that bit comes on, there's a certain attitude that Eddie shows, and then of course his demise at the hands of Frankenfurter, his failed experiment, as it were. So Meatloaf played that part perfectly, and I love his vocal and whatever happened to Saturday Night. It's absolutely fantastic. But along the same time that he was doing that stuff, he had met and was working with Jim Steinman to develop what became one of the all-time greatest albums in any genre, Bat Out of Hell. And it's for those of us who are of a certain age, it's easy to remember and possibly harder for others to understand that are younger that just how big this record was. Released in October 77. It took a little bit of time to gain steam, particularly in America. I think it made it first in Britain and Australia. This you couldn't go anywhere. In 1978, for instance, when I was still at high school, you couldn't go to a party without this album being on. You couldn't go in a car without someone having it on a cassette or an 8-track playing just round and round and round. It was blasting out everywhere. And it just became a part of the background of that time, 78, 79, Bat Out of Hell. It was beyond just an album. It was a phenomenon, and potentially start to finish one of the greatest albums ever made. There's not a weak moment on it. And it was a hell of a team that put that together. So you had Meatloaf with this fantastic voice, this great performance, the man who really knew how to interpret these songs. You had Jim Steinman, the man who had the vision and wrote the songs. Also there is Carla DeVito. We'll get back to her in just a second. And the third component, of course, to making that such a brilliant album was the guy who produced it and whose band Utopia played on a lot of the album, Todd Rundgren, seen here on the back cover of Something Anything. Now, if you've never heard the album Something Anything, it's a masterwork, early 1970s masterwork by Todd Rundgren. You probably have heard the lead, one of the singles of it. Well, there's a few singles off it, but Hello, It's Me is one of the ones. But I Saw the Light. It's was a huge hit. But anyway, he was the guy who produced and played a lot of the music on Bat Out of Hell. That motorcycle guitar that you hear in the title track, he was doing this on a track on here called Little Red Lights. This is back in the early 70s. So that all contributed to this stuff that made this album so good. It's just one of these things, the right people at the right time doing the right things. And it wasn't like the album was an easy sell. It took them a long time to find a label to pick it up. And when it finally got put out, it was a little slow to get going. but there was a legendary performance. First of all, the Old Grey Whistle Test was a huge British music show in the 70s and 80s and 90s. Lots of live band performances, lots of stuff you wouldn't see anywhere else. Serious music show on BBC Two. And they showed the video for Bat Out of Hell one week, and it got such a huge reaction that they showed it again the next week. And again, got this enormous reaction. And the album started to take off in Britain, and also simultaneously was taken off in Australia for similar reasons. But they invited Meatloaf and his band over to perform on the show, and it just was like, it was a legendary moment. You can look it up on YouTube. They performed certain tracks with Carla DeVito there, who actually Ellen Foley had done the vocals on the album, but she joined the live band to do that stuff live, giving a most incredible performance to the stupefaction of the presenters. It was just a tour de force, and also she was wearing a rather revealing outfit. But they put everything they could possibly put into that performance on the Old Grey Whistle Test, and the album just went crazy in Britain. But it started to pick up in Canada, started to pick up in other areas, and then eventually it kind of clicked in the US, and it started to gain ground, and bang, that was it. Now that album has sold something like, I don't know, there's different figures, 65 million copies I've heard mentioned. It certainly sold 40 to 50 to 60 million worldwide. In the British charts for 500 weeks. Second only, I think, to Rumours in terms of longevity there. It just had everything but the kitchen sink and this fantastic vocal performance, you know. In fact, I believe it, I mean, the album still sells today. A couple of 100,000 copies, whatever, digitally. Just the most incredible thing. So whilst I certainly don't want to emphasize that it's all of his career, it was a landmark, and it shouldn't be denied and downplayed. You could make video after video about it, and Meatloaf's portrayal of those characters on that album, you know, it's Paradise with the Dashboard Lights, with all its different sections and the different moods and the longing and the lust, and it had everything. It had motorcycle deaths, it had, you name it. Great tribute to all the people who performed in it. As you could see from Jim Steinman's follow-up, Bad for Good, where Meatloaf couldn't perform because he had problems with his throat. Not great songs, would have been far better if he'd done them. Didn't have the impact without him. However, he moved on after that, still working with Jim Steinman to do Deadringer, which was another massive seller, and that song even managed to make Cher seem rock and roll. So, and not that she was the Cher that she is today, of course, which is a very different thing, and she had flirtations with rock, married to Greg Allman and whatever. This video, again, you could not escape this video. I think it was 1980. It was everywhere. I remember going to a pub in Wolverhampton in England, and they had the first video jukebox in the city, and this was constantly on that video jukebox. It was a bar with bikers, a lot of bikers in it too, and they just loved it. And again, that powerhouse Wagnerian vocal just drove everything forward. You couldn't mistake that. Just brilliant stuff, absolutely fantastic. And I think, yeah, as I say, I think he sold 100 million. He sold more than 100 million albums worldwide. I think Dead Ringers itself, the song itself, was like #1 in multiple countries. Yeah, I mean, it just, what magnificent material, what great memories, you know. So many thanks to Meatloaf for those. And whilst I really wanted to give my appreciation for that era of stuff, I mean, he certainly didn't rest on his laurels. Bat Out of Hell 2 and 3, Midnight, The Lost and Found. There was many other hits, many other highlights, and some great touring performances. He struggled with his health here and there, but and he also, in parallel, obviously had a great film career. during the intervening years. I mean, I can think of this. He appeared in something like 50 movies. The ones I can think of off the top of my head: Roadie, which was perfect for him. Fight Club, Leap of Faith, which is a great movie. Rocky, obviously Rocky Horror in the earlier days. Wayne's World, you know, everyone's got a girlfriend in there. Everybody's girlfriend is in there. Pick of Destiny, just brilliant stuff. Always a really good actor in anything he appeared in. And there's also a fantastic edition of the BBC's classic albums where they talked about Bat Out of Hell. The whole show was about the making of that, and that's if you ever get the chance to see that, and it probably is on YouTube. Look that up. And he certainly appeared in very many rock documentaries over the year. I always appreciated him as a presenter. Appeared in a lot of British comedy shows. He was always a very good fun, good guy. So, and sadly, of course, we lost Jim Steinman last year too. Within a year, the two of them have passed. Definitely the end of an era. I actually really like this picture of him performing in the 90s, playing the guitar too. I love his guitar strap. It's fantastic. So anyway, I certainly don't want to belabor the point. I'd just like to say thank you, Meat Loaf, for all the great music. We appreciate your life, your talents, everything you've done. May you rest in peace. I'm glad to say his family were with him when he passed. My condolences to them, and I'm sure you're still rocking somewhere, sir, and may that continue through eternity. So, thanks everybody for watching. Once again, R.I.P. Meatloaf, and to everybody else, let's keep on rocking while we can. Thanks for watching, everybody.